my darlings, and welcome back to Feathers and Fiction. Good to have you guys back. How are we doing? It's been an interesting year so far. Finally, it's not negative like 20 degrees outside, so I'm feeling a little more chipper. And we're getting some more daylight now, so the seasonal depression should start to go away a little bit, hopefully. Today, me and Bonnie here, we're going to talk about Spark of the Everflame. I would say I have some mixed thoughts on it. I would say book one, kind of a mediocre fantasy. It's a romantasy, I guess. But the romance is like, there's not like, it's classified as slow burn, but I would almost argue that a little bit. And I'll probably explain myself more as I talk about the book, but that is what we are talking about today. But you know what I gotta do? I gotta give Bon her mealworms. Would you like to say hello, Bonnie? Say hi. No, you gotta talk louder. Okay. There you go, Bon. Mealworms. Mealworms? Can they see you eat your mealworms? Wait, which direction do I go here? She's like, just put it down. Dear Lord in heaven, what was that? Did someone just wreck? Hang on, my chickens are going off. It sounded like someone friggin' wrecked their car. I am paranoid when I hear suspicious activity out there because I have had someone wreck in my yard already, and across the road, and further down the road in my ditch. So, okay, nobody wrecked. Got that figured out. Bonnie's making a mess. You better eat all that. We're talking about Spark of the Everflame. I just want to say that the covers I thought for these books were cool. I do love a double exposure look. I don't get this silhouette, this profile, because it looks nothing like what I would picture the main character in the slightest. This looks like Regency era Bridgerton style hair, not unhinged, feral, snappy, stabby female main character. Whatever, let's get into it. Our main character, her name is Diem. I think it's Diem. So our main character is Diem Bellator. She's, I believe, in her early 20s, and she is a healer. Let me give you a brief explanation for this world that we live in here. So there is this group of people called the Descended, and Descended, let me make sure I said that correctly, the Descended, and they are a mixture between a god and a mortal combined. And so the Descended have like several different realms that they are like the heads of. And I believe like each realm has its own magic system, so everybody's got a little bit of some different, they all each look different too, so like you know, like people from a different realm, they've got like white hair and orange eyes or something like that. That's roughly how that works. And I think originally it was that the Descended were supposed to basically take care of the mortals and for them to like live together in some level of harmony. However, that's not exactly the case. And the mortals are kept in basically the slums, and the Descended live in absolute complete luxury. Apparently some mortals can live in the in this realm. They live in Lumnos City, which is where the Descended live. Some mortals live there, however, it's like so ridiculously expensive that it's really not it's just not achievable. There's these weird progeny laws where if a Descended has an affair with a mortal woman and there's a child, that child has to be executed because it has something with like keeping the bloodline pure or something like that. So that's like a corrupt part of this society too. Seems like, yeah, they're supposed to keep their like blood with you know, the Descendants with the Descendants, even though they like to go over and sleep with a bunch of mortals. So anywho, how the story starts off is we have our main character Diem. Her mother mysteriously just disappears, and Diem has no idea where she's gone. However, in some ways, it seems like not everybody believes that her mother's like disappeared and gone. They think that some of the reactions that she gets from, particularly like her father, is it's almost like they know where her mom is, or they know something, and no one's really telling her where. So it's a mystery. And so that's where the story starts off. We're walking through the city streets of Mortal City. It's on the day of the Forging Day, and this is some Descended holiday, if you will. There's like drunk people all over the place, so it's a pretty rowdy day. And so our main character, Diem, she's coming back from seeing patients with her coworker, Mara. Mara is an elderly woman. I don't remember how old Mara is, but she's basically like Diem's higher up mentor, if you will. So they're coming back from a day of seeing patients. Forging Day is a raucous holiday that celebrates the 9 immortal siblings known as the Kindred, crafting like a magical pact, the Forging, seeking refuge in the mortal world following the violent destruction of their own kind. Each of the Kindred fell in love with a mortal from the Emerald Nation, and then the Kindred agreed to abandon their eternal youth and bind their lives to their mortal lovers. So that's what that is all about. There is world building in this story, I'll give it that. I don't really think I'm gonna go into like heavy specifics, but just to give you an idea, like there is an actual world building system, and I appreciated that about this book. I wasn't really sure. I was pleasantly surprised because a lot of the romantasy books I've consumed as of late tend to be really lax in the world building, and so it's hard to follow like what's happening, you know? Interesting to note that Diem at this point has never actually met a Descended, which is odd because just about everybody rubs shoulders with them in some way, shape, or form. Ever since she was a child, her mother has kept her completely separated from Descended with no real explanation, which I feel like this is something that I kind of reflected on. Doesn't make a lot of sense because you would think you would have to give your child some level of explanation for that because like everybody else is exposed to them, so why is she kept excluded from them? Another important thing to note is that Diem, she's mortal. Girl's mortal. Don't you screw it up. She is a mortal. She just has white hair and gray eyes, which no other mortal in this area has. You catching what I'm putting down? Bonnie, what? Stop it. You just scrolled my notes, girl. Diem, when she was a child, had auburn hair and brown eyes. And then, by golly, there was some weird sickness, and now she doesn't. She has white hair and gray eyes. But she's mortal. There's nothing suspicious going on here. How dare you think that? Mara and Diem, they split up for the day. It's been a long day. They're both exhausted. Mara heads back to the healer center, and Diem's like, I'm gonna head home. So as she's heading home, she runs into some drunk dudes, as one does, and they, of course, are like, let's do some hanky-panky, and she's like, no thank you. She manages to like take on all these guys, and she kind of beats them up, roughs them up a bit, and then she takes all their weapons, and then takes off running. As she's running, the guys call to attention. They're like, oh, that girl there, she stole our stuff. And so now she's got these, you know, angry drunk dudes and a bunch of guards running after her. So as she's running through the streets, she comes across a woman living in poverty. And this woman agrees to kind of help her and to mislead the guards. And as a result, Diem is able to escape and go hide somewhere and not get in trouble. So as she's hiding, she comes across her mother. And her mother is with an extremely attractive looking young man. And it seems like they're having a conversation. It seems like things are a little tense. Diem at first wants to interrupt, but she can tell by their body language and stuff that something isn't quite right here. Diem is sitting there trying to listen in on this conversation between her mom and this stranger, and she's interrupted by an elderly woman who's calling her out for eavesdropping. The woman tells Diem that the answers that she's looking for, she's not going to get from any mortal or Descended. So it's clear this woman's like a seer or some type of magical being, you know? The woman says to her, that mother of yours thought she could hide it from the world, thought she could hide it from you with that little powder of hers. But secrets like that can't stay kept forever. Her focus turns skyward, taking in the scattered beams of bloody sunlight around us. Of course, Diem is taken off guard by this because there's this powder that Diem takes. It's called flame root, and this woman somehow knows that she takes this, and it's a secret. Only a few people are privy to this knowledge about her. Diem wonders if this woman knows about who her true father is, because Diem's true father is apparently no longer in the picture, possibly not even alive, and she has a stepfather now that she lives in Mortal City, but her true father is a mystery. Nobody knows who he is. Do you see where the story is going? Do you see it? Author's laying it on pretty thick. This woman creepily tells Diem that she is easy to control and that like together the two of them could do terrible things. Oh, so tempting. The woman seems to be able to gain control over Diem's body and almost like has her paralyzed, and it really freaks her out, rightfully so. She says to her, listen to me and listen close, daughter of the forgotten. She leaned forward and poked me in the shoulder. Stop running from who you are. Stop hiding. I'm not hiding from anything. And stop taking that cursed flame root powder. Ma'am. And stop taking that cursed flame root powder. Again, I locked up. She shouldn't know this. Couldn't know this. Well, she does. So clearly we're tipped off that apparently DM's mother is keeping some secrets and not being 100% honest with her. Shocker. Later on that night, DM's mom never comes home. Chapter 2 is a 6-month difference, so we're 6 months ahead. DM's father confronts her and is like, hey, are you taking your flame root powder? And DM says that she has, however, she hasn't been taking it as consistently. We find out too that her father is like one of the highest ranking mortal soldiers in the Amerian army. He's like a commander. He found some of her flame root powder in his fishing box, and he hadn't opened that for like 10 days or something like that. So her flame root powder is just sitting in there. And so obviously he's concerned that she's not taking it. I would complain that I was sick of taking the powder, that it made my brain fuzzy and my emotions dull. He would say those are necessary side effects, that the hallucinations the flame root prevented, symptoms of a disease I'd inherited from my birth father, the same illness that turned my eyes gray and my hair white at age 10, would be far more severe than a clouded mind. I would let it slip that I had actually stopped taking the flame root weeks ago, yet the visions hadn't returned. He would tell me that I was being reckless and immature, that my mother would be disappointed. At this point, DM makes a note that she's had this like little voice in the back of her head, and it's like constantly telling her to fight all the time. Anytime somebody pushes up against her or gives her any type of pressure, pushback, anything like that, she's got this little voice like, fight, 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 and it's like, you know, chanting in the back of her mind. She's chalking this up to, I stopped taking my flame root, now my weird hallucinations are coming back. But clearly we learn as the story goes on, maybe it's something else. It's not a hallucination. It's like a part of her. DM, unfortunately, has lied to her father because he's not happy with her for not taking her flame roots. However, her brother Teller, who's like 15 years old, she told him, maybe he's 17. He's a teenager. Her teenage brother there, he knows that she is no longer taking her flamer because she kind of like confides in him most, you know? And the only reason why she told him is because he told her like, hey, you know, you've been acting a bit different since you got off the flame root. And she's like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do I do? And he's like, oh, you're just like really snappy and you're really moody and you're like a little bit out of control, it feels. Since being off of flame root, she tells him like she can actually think clearly for once and her brain isn't fogged, and it's like she's able to experience life in full color and not black and white. Teller tells her that he ultimately trusts her, and if she feels that's the best decision that she should make for herself, that he's not going to snitch on her. So good job, little bro. She assures him, you know, if the symptoms come back, of course, I'll start taking my flame root again. She doesn't though. Spoiler alert. And of course, we have a little conversation where Teller and DM talk about whether or not their mom's going to come back and all this stuff. The author tends to lay these things on pretty thick. So it's like clear to me, I'm like, clearly her mom isn't actually dead. She's somewhere else doing something secretive. DM is walking Teller to his school. Now, here's something this is where I found this choice of storytelling a little bit interesting. Teller goes to a descended school. So he goes to school with a bunch of descended kids, and that's perfectly fine. No issues there. However, DM has like been made to stay away from the descendants. She's been forbidden to interact with them her entire life. But Teller's allowed to go to school with them. DM's immortal. She's immortal. She just has white hair and gray eyes. However, her brother Teller, he is mortal. Got the normal hair color, eye color. He's allowed to go to a descended school. As I'm reading this, I'm just like, I mean, did DM not find this? Did she really not like push back hard enough and be like, this makes no sense? This girl's in her like 20s now at this point. She's not a child. I don't know. Yeah, as they're talking, they're walking to school and they're talking about life and stuff. DM's, for lack of a better word, DM's best friend, aka her boyfriend, Henry, he joins them. It's pretty clear that Teller doesn't really like Henry, but we don't really know why. There's just a little bit of tension between the two of them. Teller mentions that all the descended kids have been talking about the fact that the descended king has been on his deathbed. And DM is like shocked by this because she had literally no idea that the king was dying, which again, I have a hard time believing that this woman is a healer. Even if she doesn't interact directly with the descended, you would think that as a healer and seeing patients, like gossip is all around, right? Like you would think that she would have heard the townsfolk or people talking about the fact that the king is dying, and she's like, it's like she's literally lived in a different world and has no idea that any of this is going on. So this is like all brand new information. Even Henry, her boyfriend, is like shocked that she doesn't know this information. Apparently, nobody knows who will have the crown next. It is like there's direct relatives to the descended king. However, the crown doesn't just pass down. It's like the crown chooses who it wants next. That's how that system works. Everybody assumes that the prince, aka Prince Luther, is next in line for the crown. At the mention of him, Henry kind of like stiffens and he's like, ooh. And DM notices that, and she's like, oh, that's an interesting interaction to have towards the mention of that guy. So she asks Teller if he's ever met Luther, and he's like, no, I don't know Luther personally. However, I'm friends with his sister, Lily. She goes to my school. Apparently he blushes a little bit. So it's clear that like Teller and Princess Lily have like a little crush on each other. They drop Teller off at his school, and then Henry tells DM like, hey, I'm going over to Fortos to do a delivery tomorrow. I'd really love if you could come with me. I think it'd be great to spend some time together. So DM agrees that she'll go and ask Mara if it's okay to get the day off. She's kind of like, I don't really know, we're pretty busy. And Henry's like begging her, like, come on, it'd be great to have a little bit of a break. You've been working so hard. So she's like, okay, I promise. I'll go ask Mara if I can have the day off. She is actually a little eager to go to Fortos because it would give her a chance to potentially discover or get more information about her mother's disappearance. And as like some of her mom's former colleagues live there, and it would give her some alone time with Henry. And they've been wanting some alone time. So DM and Henry split ways for the day. She goes to the healer center, and we learn that she started to learn to become a healer ever since she was a young kid. So Mara's known her since she was a little tyke. As a result, she obtained her healer status soon after finishing school, and she had become a very skilled healer. She's like right up there with her mom and Mara. However, there is one crucial gap in her education, and that is her knowledge of healing the descended. All descended were gifted with quick healing abilities that rendered them immune to most illnesses and injuries. For grave conditions, they could travel to Fortos, realm of force and valor, for a visit to the powerful magical healers that served in the Amarian army. As a result, the descended rarely sought the aid of mortal healers. There were, however, a few exceptions. Children, whose healing powers developed at puberty with the rest of their magic, and a handful of rare potions, the details of which I'd been forbidden from learning. My mother had even gone so far as to lock away the notes of her patient visits so I couldn't study them later. Again, this is just kind of like a weird choice because it doesn't make any sense. So though her mom kept her patient experiences with the descended secret from DM, Mara apparently didn't hold to those same convictions because Mara would tell her in great detail about the experiences that she had with the descended. DM brings up the fact that Henry invited her to Fortos, and Mara like eagerly agrees to let DM go. She insists, however, that she needs to take a vial of contraceptive with her just in case for Henry to drink, because she's like, don't wanna not have that on hand. And so, DM's like all flustered, and she's like, I mean, okay, fine, sure, I suppose. Like, and then, she embarrassedly she gets all embarrassed, so she takes the vial anyway. As they're, giggling and teasing each other back and forth, a young descended man comes bursting into the healing center, and he's like all panicked. Chapter 4. The descended asks for Arlie Bellator. That would be DM's mother. He's like, we need Arlie to come to the palace immediately. There's been an accident. Mara obviously jumps into action. DM's like, hey, I'm going with you. There's no way you're going by yourself. It sounds like there's too many people for you to heal on your own. DM realizes this is the closest she's ever been to like really seeing a descendant up very close. She notes that she imagined them to be like these very cold, soulless type individuals, but this kid is like panicked and acting very much like a normal mortal person. So they get all their healing stuff together and they rush off to the palace. The younger descended kid takes them through this like hidden shortcut through the palace wall and gets them over to where this like room or roof collapsed of some sort, building collapse on, and there's like kids trapped underneath some of like the beams and stuff. This is DM's first time ever really seeing the absolute over-the-top luxury that the descended live in, and she's like dumbstruck. She can't even believe that these people live in all this wealth, and yet she and the rest of the mortals live in basically the slums. And she's like, I have a really hard time understanding how anybody could feel comfortable living in such luxury while everybody else suffers. So DM is taken to heal the youngest kid that's there, and it's a young girl. She's the most severely injured in the bunch. This little girl turns out to be Princess Lillian, the girl that Teller has a crush on. Bonnie's really talkative today. Interestingly, DM seems to become aware of like a magical presence. Like she can feel it. Like it's like tension in the air. She doesn't quite know what it is. She has no reference as to what this strange feeling is, but we, the readers, can tell that there's this certain aura in the air, and it's like, it's magic. She can feel magic. This girl ain't mortal. It's described as something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt heavy in an oddly sentient? Yeah. It felt heavy in an oddly sentient way, like the heft of it pressed against my skin, exploring me, assessing me. There's this man who's with Lily, and he's like extremely rude and aggressive and answering questions for Lily. So DM is like purposely asking Lily questions, and then this bozo behind her is like bleh, answering for her. DM straight up ignores him and focuses solely on Lily, who has a broken arm. When she actually turns and looks at the man, she recognizes him immediately. It's that dude that she saw having a tense argument with her mom the day she disappeared. And so DM is immediately put on guard. She panics for a second, then she's like, hang on, I gotta get back to my job. She goes to set Lily's bone, and she's interrupted. Wait, the man interrupted. Shouldn't I do this? Are you the healer? I shot back. I refused to look at him for fear that his condescending expression might make me lose the fraying control I had on my temper. How dare he suggest I need his help to do my job? Lily, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and count to 3. This is an important detail. DM is able to set the bone herself. And at first DM doesn't, she's like, well, I mean, I do this all the time. This is like, this is an average Tuesday for me. So Luther is shocked. And so is like everybody else, because apparently the descended bones, even of children, are like super rigor. They're like titanium, you know? And so an average regular mortal cannot set descended bones. Only other descended can set bones of a descended person. The fact that DM can do this is again, very strange, not normal, and not something a mortal can do. So, but we're going to keep living in denial that she's not descended, you know, since she's 100% mortal. This is like, what page is it on? It's on page 55 of this book. This book holds out for the entire time that DM is not a descended. She's 100% immortal. And I'm like, we all figured this out right away. So why did we have to keep acting shocked and like denying and gaslighting ourselves about the obvious truth? The man continued to assess me with unnerving intensity. His glittering eyes watched with every movement like a hawk on the hunt. DM gets the bone set, and Lily immediately faints. Chapter 5. So DM's like, okay, quickly, something ain't right here. So there's something else. I missed something. Turns out Lily's actually been like partially impaled or by some part of the beam or part of the building, and she's like bleeding out from a wound on her back. Again, a strange feeling stirred in my chest. My hands tingled with a sensation that was at once freezing cold and scorching hot. It was almost painful, but I didn't dare pull away. As she's trying to stop the bleeding, she's like packing the wound. It's not absorbing the blood quick enough, and she like places her hands on her, and she gets overwhelmed with that sense of feeling. There's this like bright silver light coming from her hands. She assumes that that's Lily's descended blood like kicking in, like it's her magic kicking in and doing the healing. She doesn't for once sit there and think like it's her own hands doing it. And then suddenly the wound is sealed, and it's like perfectly healed. There's not a scar. There's no evidence that anything was even there. Again, no evidence that anything was there, but Lily, I believe how this works is that like children's descended magic doesn't come through until they're older. So like Lily couldn't have done this herself because her magic isn't strong enough to do that. And so again, everyone's just going to sit there and not think that this is weird, that DM healed, set a bone, and then healed a gaping, serious wound. Okay. So DM asks if she can go clean herself up. She starts heading back into an area of this room that she's in. She's confronted by Luther. He was so much closer than he'd been before, close enough to notice the square set of his jaws, sweeping cliffs of his cheekbones, his nose, straight as a broadsword's blade, close enough to smell the cedar and leather of his woodsy musk, close enough to see that his icy blue eyes, stark against his bronzed skin, weren't just static blue. They moved, illuminated by a churning swirl of light and veins that shadow. Gods, he's beautiful. There you go, there's the line. The light you made back there. That was Lily. I did nothing. I'm immortal. He looked unconvinced, scanning my face in search of some answer I couldn't provide. So Luther's like, he's on to her from the start. Anywho, so they have like this little tiny argument, and you know, like DM's already, she doesn't trust him, and she's like, this is the guy I saw with my mom. But she decides for now not to bring it up, and she's like, nah, I'll just keep my head down for right now. Chapter 6, DM is sitting in the washroom, this extravagant washroom, and she has herself a little cry on the floor. And I'm like, that's good. It's good to decompress. She's a little freaked out right now. She's upset that her mom is gone. She's upset the fact that she's now eye to eye with the guy that potentially is responsible for her mother's disappearance. And it's like she finally gets hit with the grief of her mom being gone and that sense of hopelessness that she doesn't know where to go or how to find her mom. So she has herself a little cry, and I was like, I do appreciate that, because every now and then it is really good to, it's very cathartic to sit down and cry. She ends up leaving the palace, and as she's walking out, she gets her first ever real glimpse of Lumnos City. Because remember, when she leaves the palace, she goes out through the front door and not through a side door. And of course, she's like irritated by just the sheer overabundance of just too much wealth. They go back to the healers center, her and Mara do, and talk a little bit. They do a little debrief about the situation. And as they're talking, DM tells her that she can't stand Prince Luther. He was really rude to her and was like insisting that she set the bone for Lily. Or he was insisting that he set the bone for Lily. And DM was like mad about that because she's like, well, why would you do that? I'm the healer. And Mara's kind of like, Mara's chuckling abruptly stopped. And you didn't let him. Do you know how many broken bones I've set, Mara? I could do it in my sleep, blindfolded. Yes, but the girl was descended. So? She gave me a curious look. It's just, she trailed off, frowning. Descended bones are strong, stronger even than iron. Mortals don't have the strength to move them. Now Mara is aware of this knowledge. And I feel like that alone would cause for questioning, you know? Because something ain't right here. This girl can't, she just set bones for, and it's not something that an even more experienced healer like Mara can do. At this time, DM mentions maybe it would be a good idea for her to start taking over some of the healer's work for the Descended at the palace. Mara is kind of hesitant to that because she's like, your mother would not approve of this. And she's like, but you know, besides, like, your mom is going to come back one day and I don't really want to get in trouble. DM's like, she's not coming back. Why does everybody keep pretending this? And Mara's like, well, you know, we can't lose hope. And at this point, DM is fed up. She's like, my mom is not coming back. It's been 6 months. It's naive of me to think this. I have to move on with my life. Somewhere in here, we also find out DM's mom was the palace healer for the Descended. That was her job. She took on this job primarily because this is how she was able to get Teller into the Descended school. So DM finds this out. I don't remember exactly where. It's in that chapter, but she finds this out. And so DM thinks like, I have to take over this so that way my brother can stay in school. Because Mara was like, well, no, I'll do the job and I'll keep the bargain there. And DM's like, no, it should be my responsibility. So maybe I should take this over. If Arlie doesn't fulfill this bargain, then her to like serve the crown and serve the Descended, that her life is forfeit and she could be executed. That's a detail that is added to all of this. DM is like, she fumbles for her words. But the king, Teller says he's unconscious. If he dies, maybe no one else knows. Maybe. Prince Luther knows. He's the one who negotiated it with your mother on behalf of the crown. At dinner later that night, DM is reflecting on all these secrets that are now coming forth and all these secrets that her mother kept from her. And she's quite upset about this. She remembers her flame root, the bottle that holds all of her, you know, darkest emotions in tangible form. She is fed up. I'm ticked off with how much I've been deceived and how naive I feel. And she still doesn't quite understand what this flame root powder is. She has an idea, but she decides that night, as her brother and her father are sleeping, that she's going to take the rest of her flame root supply and she's going to chuck it into the sea. Chapter 7, DM is finally on the road to Fortos with Henry, and she's still lost in her thoughts. She's angry. She's really upset at this point. Henry's all like, hey baby, you want to like talk about your feelings? And she's like, no, I don't, because I am full of rage.
I don't feel anything emotionally except for rage. 24/7, 365 at 1,000,000%.
In this chapter, we're reminded that Henry absolutely 100% loathes the Descendants. He hates them so much. When Henry was a child, his mother became ill, and the only thing that could treat her was this certain type of herb that was found in Montios. And so mortals are forbidden from going there. So Henry's father had to send in a request to go get the herb, and the request was denied. And so this very treatable illness that Henry's mom had was then, she passed away from it. And so that's where his like pure hatred for descendants started. Through the rumor mill, Henry tells her he heard about her heroic efforts at the palace, and he's like, oh, I'm a little interested by this because I thought descendants were specifically off limits for you. And, Diem admits that now that her mom's gone, she's probably going to take over her mother's responsibilities at the palace. Henry says that this is probably actually a good idea, which is a surprise for Diem to hear. He says, sheltering you doesn't keep you safe forever. To beat your enemy, you have to know your enemy intimately. And there's no better place to do that than in their home. He has this very like cold, calculating tone when he says it, and it does, like something feels a little wrong to Diem there, but she's like, I'm just gonna ignore it for now. They make camp for the night. Diem like just can't get over how much rage she feels as she's sitting there.
And if you think that there's something behind that, then you're crazy.
She's mad about her father not taking her mother's disappearance very seriously. She's angry at her mother for making this fool's bargain with the king and the crown. And then she's angry at herself for not demanding truth and letting these things slip past her. So the author brings that up, and I appreciate that because that's kind of like what I said, right? I'm just like, how could you see these things and not demand truth? However, my beef is with the fact that Diem is not even honest with herself that maybe potentially she's not mortal when there's like extremely obvious, screamingly obvious indicators that something just isn't right here. Like she's doing things as a mortal that she should not be able to do. And so I wouldn't be as so annoyed with this if it resolved faster in the book, but Diem holds to the fact that she's mortal, even though she has her like disbelief towards that. She continues that frame of thought the whole entire book, and it just got really annoying because more things happen that it's like, you're not mortal. Please stop lying to yourself. Henry comes back to the camp after gathering some firewood, and the two share a much needed moment of intimacy. The interaction here between Diem and Henry, it's not a very explicitly written smoosh scene. However, it is pretty clear that Diem, she's kind of using Henry. Like, it's a little bit more, let me take out my rage and frustration and see if I can, like, if a good old O will help me, subside some of that rage. Henry is like, he seems kind of into it because she's a little bit dominant, but it's largely just like, it's a more like lustful interaction versus like, I really want to sleep with you because I genuinely love you and care about you and like want to have this intimate moment. It's a little bit more of like, let me get my frustration out. Here's a red flag. So before they get to smashing, Diem's like, hey, I need you to take this contraceptive just in case. Henry made a non-committal sound as his mouth roamed my exposed skin, tasting my fire-warmed flesh. Henry, do we really need it? He murmured against my throat. Who are we to interfere with the old god's blessing? My lust cooled slightly as I shot him a sharp look. I was like, big ol' red flag. Anywho, she's like, well, if that's how you feel, like, we ain't proceeding any further here. And so he's like, oh, fine, just give me the stuff. And he takes the contraceptive. There's this line that Diem says about herself, and I'm like, okay. But I was made for swinging fists and rash words, my edges too jagged and my temper too hot. Nothing in me was delicate. And she says this as she's noting that the girls that Henry has been with previously were all these super feminine, petite, very, girl's girl type thing. But Diem, that just ain't her, like she likes to punch people and insult people. This is like the part of the book where I'm kind of like, I just would like to see more diversity in how these characters are written, because I'm tired of reading the same thing. Like, I'm the main female character and I'm not like other girls. I like to rough and tumble. And this is coming from somebody like, I grew up a tomboy. Like, I played with boys' toys, pickup trucks, dump trucks. I love that kind of stuff as a kid. I rode horses. I did a lot of outdoor work, played in the mud, was always dirty, always out in the woods, building things and stuff like that. So I grew up as a tomboy, but also like I still liked girly things too. And I'm like, can we just get more female main characters that are both? Like, be a tomboy, but also be comfortable with just being a delicate flower when you want to be too. Like, I think it's cool when you can do both. Or it's perfectly fine if you're more delicate and feminine. Like, not every female main character needs to be this swashbuckling pirate of a woman. Like, she could be more feminine and delicate because there's strength in those things too. Like, I don't know, we just got the Mary Sue that I'm not like other girls. I just get tired of reading it, and I would love to see some more diversity in how some of these girls are. I gave some of a pass of like DM's rage and her anger. I gave her a pass in some ways because she's no longer taking this flame root powder, and it clearly makes her more aggressive. And we don't quite know why that is, but I was like, okay, so she's a little bit unhinged. I can kind of understand it, but I don't know. I would just like to see a bigger variety in how these female characters are written. Henry falls asleep, and you know, he's just blissed out. He's just in his happy place. And DM, however, is still laying there just like cooking. She's like on fire. Something is changing in her. She just doesn't have the words for it yet.
This could be the start of something new.
Chapter 8, DM wakes up from a nightmare. It's left her rattled. She gets up out of the bed, the rucksack or what is it called? She gets out of the like sleeping bag, bedroll type thing, and walks away from the camp. So she walks away from the camp, which was like mistake numero uno. She's met with a wolf, and this wolf has her cornered, and she fights the wolf. She's like, I'm gonna die. And then as she's sitting there thinking like, I'm gonna die, she blasts the wolf with her hands, and the wolf like explodes into ashes. And at first she thinks again that this is just some type of hallucination. She like races back to the camp, and she's like frantically searching for flame root. She's like, did I bring any flame root with me? Henry's awake, and he's like, what are you looking for? What's going on? And she's like, I'm looking for my flame root. He actually is privy to the knowledge of her taking flame root, but alas, as she's looking, she recalls like, oh crap, I threw all of my flame root away, which I'm like, yeah, girl, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Anywho, Henry's like asking her why she's so freaked out, and she admits that she had this hallucination about this wolf, and he's like, oh no, like it was real, I heard it. DM's like, well, where did it go? And he's like, well, you scared it off, like I could hear it. Which I was like, okay, well, if you heard it, then why didn't you race off to help her? Whatever this wolf here symbolizes, I think it could have been done a little better. Henry writes the whole situation off as DM is just so overworked and so stressed and upset about her mom's disappearance. Her little noggin just is not working correctly. And so he urges her to come back to bed. And as he turns, DM notices that he has a tattoo of a tree on his shoulder. A gnarled tree with leaves of flame inset in a circlet of vines. The sacred Everflame, the tree of life and death. According to the old mortal religion, all life began as sparks from the Everflame that fell to the earth as glowing seeds. At death, those found worthy by the old gods would be placed among its branches, where their earthly bodies would turn to ash, but their souls would remain forever warmed by the undying fire. Those found unworthy were doomed to an eternity in a cold hell encased in ice, far from the Everflame's redeeming heat. The symbol of the Everflame, is kind of like a rebel type symbol because it's the old mortal religion, and that's a no-no. Some mortals still believe in this old religion, which I guess you could say that Henry does, because he's mentioned, like he's even said like the old gods and stuff like that in conversation. She straight up asks Henry when he got that tattoo, and he's like, oh, I got it a few months ago. When asked why, he's like, oh, it's to honor the old gods. Do you know what the descendant would do if they saw it? I don't care. Henry, they'd flay the skin right off your back. Let them try. His bitter tone sent a chill rippling down my spine. And then before she can argue anymore, Henry just yanks her into an all-consuming kiss, and the two of them smash again, as one does. Chapter 9, they arrive at Fortos the next morning. As they're coming into Fortos, they go across an invisible border, because borders tend to be invisible, but they're DM feels like a very, almost like if you've ever been shocked by an electric fence, this is how I pictured it. DM, they go across this like line or into like, as they enter into Fortos, there's this like electric shock that just radiates throughout DM's body, and she's like, ow, like what was that? And Henry's like, what was what? And she's like, you didn't just feel that? And he's like, I didn't feel anything. So clearly she can feel magic. Okay, again, something ain't right here, and we're gonna just pretend that this isn't a sign of something more. Okay. While they're in Fortos, Henry goes off and does his thing. DM goes and visits a warehouse to get supplies for the Healer Center. The woman that runs this warehouse. Her name is Leona, I believe. Yeah, Leona. She's a former coworker, friend of Diem's mom. While she's there, Diem takes the opportunity to ask her, Leona, if she has any information about where her mom would have gone. She's like, did you know if my mom was going on, any trips recently? Like if she was supposed to do something? The question seems to put Leona on edge. And Diem picks up on that. And then she, brushes it off saying like, I'm so sorry, I don't know anything. That falls flat. Diem gathers supplies and she finds in this like corner another supply of flame root. And so she asks Leona if she can get some of that as well. And Leona immediately gets real weird, real fast, like almost like panicking, and she snaps at her and she's like, well, that's a regulated substance and you shouldn't know anything about that. Diem is rightfully astounded by this reaction because to her, like, she's been taking flame root, but she had no idea that it was a regulated substance. She quickly backpedals and is like, I'm sorry, I mistook that. I thought that was this and I need more of that. And so Leona's like really flustered and she gets her the other thing, even though she knows that Diem's lying, because I feel like Diem's not that great of a liar. Leona kind of is like, all right, you've overextended your visit, get out of here. And she tells her as she leaves, merely knowing that powder exists is enough for the crown to order your execution, girl. I don't know what that mother of yours was up to down in Lumnos, but you need to stay far away from it. Ooh, spooky mystery. Chapter 10, Henry secures a room for them at a local tavern. And so Diem heads there after she finishes her weird interaction at the warehouse. And they're sitting down and she asks him if he's ever seen flame root in his deliveries, and he says no. Henry is, what are you doing? What are you doing? Another detail about Henry, he's basically like a courier. I guess his father does that job too, so that's what he does. So she's asking him if he's ever seen flame root in any of the deliveries that he's ever made, and he's like, nope, never seen it. Diem wants to figure out if there's a way for her to secure some more flame root for herself, but now realizes that she would have to go about it in a much more secretive way, now knowing that it's a regulated substance. As they're sitting there at the table, they're interrupted by Henry's friend named Breck. This guy is a tradesman and he largely fabricates weaponry. Breck seems a bit taken by Diem, and as is every man that encounters her. I get a little tired of that too. Like, I get that she's pretty and whatnot, but like, I get tired of reading like every dude that approaches her is like, I just get tired. It gets so annoying after a while. Like, oh, she's super hot, but she doesn't know that she's super hot. She doesn't know, but like she is, and all the guys just like want to bone her. I'm just like, ugh, it's so overdone. Breck makes a note that Diem's got these like really thick, kind of bulky twin daggers on her, and he offers her for free of charge, out of the goodness of his heart. He offers her this like super slim, super beautiful, well-made knife, or it's more of like a blade, and that he made. He reached into his boot and pulled out a short, thin blade. Its smooth metal was the color of a storm-darkened sky, the telltale sign of Fortosian steel, one of the only substances that could pierce descended skin. Its onyx handle was carved with wavering flames on one side and interwoven with branches on the other. He balanced it between his fingers, running a thumb along its edge until a wisp of blood appeared before sliding it across the table to me. Diem ends up accepting the knife from Breck, even though she's kind of like hesitant and doesn't really want to take it. But upon hearing that it can pierce descended skin, she's like, this might not be a bad idea. So she takes the knife. Chapter 11, Diem goes to bed and wakes up hours later and Henry is not there. So she creeps out of her room and goes down to the dining hall where she last saw him. And now he's sitting around a table with like 9 other guys. Diem immediately gets suspicious of this. She notices that all these men sitting around the table all have the same Everflame tattoo in various different spots of their bodies, and they've got them like all exposed, you know? And I'm like, that seems kind of dumb, but whatever. She creeps a little closer and overhears somebody talking about war, and she initially panics for a moment, not having known that war was brewing. Her father would be called back into service, and she's like, that would leave me and Teller with no father. Like, that would be not great for us right now. And so she's a little panicked by this. As she's sitting there, she gets hit with this like weird vision of herself on the battlefield. She's looking sad but confident. She can't tell if this is a vision from like a hallucination or if it's real. So she bounces back after having this weird out of the blue vision. And she's about to, this is when she notices that everybody has the tattoo of the Everflame, and she's like, I was going to go about and mind my business, but now I'm mad because this seems suspicious. And so she's like, well, I'm gonna go confront them about this. So she starts marching her way over to the table. And as she's marching over, Henry sees her, and then everybody around notices, and they all like rush to cover up their tattoos. She's like, Henry, could I have a word with you? And you know, everybody's kind of like, no, dude's gonna get yelled at. She confronts him and is like, why do y'all have these tattoos? And he says, I'm sorry, he started. I didn't realize how late. I don't care that you were out late. I'm not your wife. Henry flinched at that. What does that tattoo really mean? And why do you all have it? Henry at first, he kind of like tries to manipulate her. And he's like, well, you know, I don't really have to tell you anything because you're not really telling me the truth about what's going on with you. He tells her it would be safer for her if he kept specifics to himself. He would be able to better protect her if she didn't know certain things. And she said, I don't need you to protect me. I'm not going to break. Are you sure about that? He snapped. You haven't been stable lately. Which I was like, that's not exactly the nicest way to word that. DM is so mad at him. She pictures in her head her just like crushing this guy. Like she wants to hurt him badly. She's like a little confused by this very aggressive, visceral imagery in her head of hurting Henry. It's like terrifying, but simultaneously captivates her. She tells him, you know, to leave her alone, and she goes back to their room to sleep because she's like, if I don't get out of here, I don't know what I'm going to do to this guy. Chapter 12, they're on their way home from Fortos. They are not talking to each other. She's haunted by the memory of that visceral imagery she had of like hurting Henry. And here we get some lovely self-aware. I'd always been a spitfire and proud of it, an unbreakable spirit in a world that wanted me to be wit, small, subservient. But no longer was that spark manifesting in courage or innocent mischief. Now, it had become something destructive, something deadly, and if I couldn't learn to control it soon, I feared it would destroy me, or the people I loved most. DM ends up breaking the silence and basically apologizes for her behavior, even though I don't really think she needed to apologize necessarily, but whatever. And this breaks the tension between the two of them. We get another tidbit of why Henry dislikes the Descended. So obviously it was the situation with his mom, but then he also, I guess, watched a Descended in Lumno City like run over a small boy and was like mad about it and told the kid to stay out of his way. So he like ran this kid over and left him for dead in the street. And so Henry's like, that was kind of what set him off as of late, the more recent thing that gave him the ambition to hate the Descended. Henry went back to the area that this little boy was ran over, and he was like waiting to find the Descended again so he could kill this Descended. And a mortal man finds him. He says, a man found me, a mortal man. He took one look at me and somehow he knew what I was there to do. He said I could die a meaningless death on one act of vengeance, or I could channel it into something bigger, something that mattered, something that would make a lot more of them pay than just that one man. Henry finally admits that he joined the Guardians of the Everflame, which is a rebellion, a mortal rebellion. Well, it was actually the name of a rebellion that took place during the Blood War. And so the Guardians are like rising again, but they're a rebel group. The hope is that one day they will become strong enough again to be able to fight back against the Descended and basically even out the playing field and not be so mistreated and stomped on by the Descended. That's the hope of the Guardians. He tells DM that she should join the movement because she'd be perfect. The access you would have at the palace as their healer would be invaluable. You could find out their weaknesses, how to get around their healing abilities, maybe even test out different poisons by telling them it's medicinal. I was like, sir, slow your roll there. All right, that's a big no-no because DM has taken a vow to not harm but to heal. That's a big ask for her. She tells Henry, like, I'll consider it. I'm thinking about it. And he's like over the moon enthusiastic that she's at least agreed to think about it. And then he's like, you know what? We could recruit Teller too. And she immediately puts a stop to that. She's like, absolutely not. We are not wrapping my 17, 16-year-old little brother. We're not getting him involved in this. He's too young. Henry's like, well, he's old enough to be considered a man, so like he should be able to make his own decisions. She's like, right, he should be able to make his own decisions. So if he comes to this knowledge on his own and wants to join, cool, but I'm not going to invite him in like it's some cool club. The rest of the trip home, Henry like excitedly talks about all of the missions that he's been on and what they're doing for the rebellion. I listened without comment, remarking how his face lit up with each story. He was so proud, so certain of his path. Then Henry drops that he loves Diem and he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. And Diem is like shocked by this because she's like, well, I love him too, but I just don't know if I love him that way. And so she kind of brushes off the comment and she was like, I'm sorry, Henry, I can't really say those words back to you because I just have so much going on in my life right now that that's a lot for me to really entertain. She just kind of skirts around that for now. But Henry's like, he's just a simple boy that doesn't take much to make him happy. And so he's just hody hum, is totally okay with that. Chapter 13, it's been 2 weeks since the trip to Fortos, and Diem convinces Mara that she's prepared to take over her mother's position as the palace healer. She goes through her mother's notes on healing Descended and finds out that they're not so much different than treating mortals. There's one material or substance that is completely deadly to Descended, and it's this thing called Godstone. If formed into a projectile or blade, a serious strike could be instantly fatal, and even minor blows risked an infection from its lethal toxin. Though harmless to mortals, its effects were ferociously destructive to Descended, a gruesome and painful death with no known antidote. Wouldn't Henry just love to get his hands on that information? Remember, at this time, Diem is also aware of that secret passageway into the palace.
Secret tunnel! Secret tunnel!
After she went over there to heal the Descended children. She has two very important things that the rebel group would really want to know to use against their enemy. Mara and Diem are going back over to the palace, and they go the correct way, the full way into the palace. And the front entryway of the palace is guarded by a creature called a Gryvern. So this is a magical creature with a spiked, scaled head of a sea dragon, wings and front talons of an eagle, and the body of a lion. And so this Gryvern flies off the wall and takes an interest in Diem, because everybody takes interest in Diem. Again, I know that's part of the story, but it's so tiring to just read the same thing over and over again. I'm kind of like, okay, we get it. Diem's just so mysterious and awesome and wonderful and so cool. Once they're inside the palace, they are questioned by these really condescending watchmen. Mara has like no issue keeping her cool when these people are like staring down their noses at her. However, Diem is like about to spontaneously combust. Like she cannot take the disrespect. She doesn't have the patience for it. So Diem is told she has to leave all of her weapons behind. She's not allowed to have a knife or anything like that on her. She retorts back that she needs a knife to cut some of the like bandages and whatnot for her work. A guard gets like really upset with her, and they start to kind of like scuffle. He ends up touching her inappropriately, and then she snaps and defends herself, as one does. Prince Luther appears and he orders for Diem to let go of his guard. So Diem has managed to like grab this guard and like rough him up. And this is another thing to note, because she's mortal. That guy's a Descended. And, Descendants just can't be pushed around by mortals. And so, again, I'm just like, nobody's going to sit there and call it what it is. Like, how is this mortal manhandling a Descended guard? Luther shows up and he tells her, like, unhand my guard, woman. He assures her that his inappropriate behavior will be dealt with. The guard calls her a biatch. Luther's magic like lashes out. Luther's like super mad that his guard would be so disrespectful. Luther's magic, it's kind of like shadow magic, because of course it is, and it like shoots out and like wraps around the guard and like kind of starts constricting him. But remember, he's Ascended, so like he can heal from all of this. Diem makes a note that she feels like she's like attracted to Luther. Like there's this pull, there's this aura to him that she can't ignore. And I guess it's his magic. She's attracted to his magic. I'm sure this book will later end up being like, we're fated mates, because of course it would. After all of this, excitement, just trying to get in the darn building, Luther leads them to the patients that need to be seen, which are two little boys. The two little boys, their mothers are standing nearby, and these women are like stunningly gorgeous. They're just dressed head to toe to the nines, because they don't do anything besides look pretty all the time. This interaction happens. Cousins, Luther said with a shallow nod. Your Highness, they said in unison as they rose and curtsied. One of them, a pretty woman dripping in emeralds and mauve taffeta, fluttered her lashes in his direction. How kind of you to come sit with us, Luther, she cooed, her smile coy. Prince Luther, he corrected, and the woman's face burned bright pink enough to match her dress. I'm only here to escort the healers. My eyes bounced between them, fascinated by this dynamic. They were cousins? Was she flirting with him? Not the incest! The woman that was like flirting with Luther notices that DM has a knife and she starts like having a hissy fit about the knife, but Luther says it's fine. He allows it because he's the one escorting her and she needs it for her healing stuff. This woman is like really condescending and rude to DM, and it is firing DM up. Like DM's been on fire since, she left Fortos 2 weeks ago. She is a raging wildfire at this point, and so it is taking every ounce of her strength not to just absolutely backhand this woman across the face. The Descendant woman makes her a mistake by making a comment that mortals are such barbaric people and they're very unkind, and DM like snaps at her and says that she treats sick and starving kids on a daily basis. Meanwhile, this woman and her family get to live in complete and absolute excess. And so she tells her, I would like to argue that you are the more barbaric of the two of us because you live with so much excess and you don't think to extend that to people who have less than you. I think that's worse. Luther, thankfully, sees that another extreme blow up is going to happen, and so he tries to de-escalate the situation by intervening and apologizing on the woman's behalf. Then he pulls DM aside and he says to her, if conditions were that bad in Mortal City, your mother was supposed to warn me so I could provide assistance. My scowl returned in earnest. Well, she hasn't been around to do that, has she? He stiffened at the pointed accusation in my tone. Besides, things are always that bad in Mortal City. Always have been. To be honest, I really didn't love this point because I feel like Luther, as the prince, he should have been aware of the fact that like Mortal City is impoverished, because like he goes over to Mortal City. He's been over there. He's been in the streets, like, because that's where DM saw him and her mother interacting. So, I don't know, like, I just like have a hard time believing that he was completely unaware that, children are starving and dying. So like he have like selectively decide not to see reality for what it is. But yet he can see DM's strange abilities that she shouldn't have as a mortal. He can see that and question that, but he can't see starvation in his own area and not question that and not already be doing something about that. I don't know. Like, I'm supposed to like Luther, but I'm like, this guy seems like an absolute airhead too, because he could see this stuff right in front of him and choose not to do anything about it. It's not really noble of you to be like, well, your mom didn't tell me. The evidence is right there. But, he offers to help, and DM's like, well, I don't really want your help. Like, it's a little too, too little too late. Major reform is needed, but, why would he be concerned at this point? It's never been an issue for him up until now. DM is really mad, and she's like, you know what? I gotta walk it back. I gotta calm down. So she decides to change the conversation by asking how Lily is doing. Lily, you'll never believe it, she has healed remarkably fast. I wonder why. Luther brings up how close Lily and Teller are, and how if they develop feelings, or if their friendship develops into real feelings, how dangerous that could be for them. DM reminds him, though, that it wouldn't really be that dangerous for Lily. It would be dangerous for Teller, because the mortals are the ones who always pay. And she also tells him, though, if you try to force these two apart, they are going to fight harder to be together. It's best not to intervene and let them come to conclusions on their own. That way stuff doesn't get out of hand. They're sitting there arguing about Teller and Lily, and so DM, like, it says she pokes him in the chest as they're arguing, and they're standing like just inches, like inches apart. And Mara's standing off in the background just like, and the two cousins are like, oh, sorry, bumped my mic. The cousins are like shocked. They're just absolutely gobsmacked at how close these two are standing together. I don't remember how or why, but he's like gripping her. Why is he touching her? Touching you, touching me. He like grabs her hand for some reason. So they're standing inches apart. He has her hold of her hand. She pokes him in the chest. The warm grip of his hand was infuriatingly distracting. I started to speak again, and His eyes dropped to my lips. My mouth went dry. Gods, I really, really hated him. No, you don't. You are very much into this. Chapter 14, Diem returns home, and she is still fuming mad. Her father recognizes this, and he is like, go get your practice sword. We're gonna slap each other around a little bit and get some of that frustration out. So they fight. What information do we acquire through this conversation? Diem asks her dad, how can you stand serving the Descended? He tells her that he doesn't serve them exclusively, but everyone in Amarian, mortal and Descended alike. Yes, he fought against rebels back in the old, like the other war. He did fight against the rebels, but he's also fought Descended. So for him, he thinks, I fight for both. I don't serve one or the other. I paused and lowered my sword. But who decides who's an enemy? The crowns do. And what if the crowns are the real enemy? Careful, Diem. His severe tone matched his features. You speak of treason. My eyes rolled. Was it not treason to the people of Amarian when they came in and took over our cities and our holy sites, when they cut down the Everflame, when they started slaughtering children for being born to mixed parents? Diem is starting to see for herself some of the injustices that Henry has been so fired up about, because now they're starting to impact her. They're not just impacting her, but they're impacting everybody else. She is upset by it and wants to fight back. She's asking questions, trying to figure it out. And her father tells her that the Descended are more powerful, so you must be careful about raising a blade to those who can easily overpower you. And he basically tells her, like, please, dear, choose your battles wisely. Stay alive. Like, do what you have to do to stay alive. Later on that night, Diem tells Teller that she would fully support him if he did truly love Lily and wanted to run off with her. And I meant it. Though I couldn't fathom ever falling for a Descended, I would die before I'd ever allow myself to get caught with one of them. Sure, I would stand by Teller's side, whatever choice he made. Even if he was rash and foolish and broke all the rules, I would do it because I knew he would do it for me too. He always had. I feel like this is kind of a dumb thing too, because she's like basically saying, like, I hate the Descended, but if Teller wants to be with one, I would be totally cool with that. And I'm like, are you sure that you would? Are you sure? Well, I don't know. Chapter 15, the following day, Diem is called to a brothel in Paradise Row to treat a prostitute who'd been beat up by a client. Everyone there tries to convince her to become a prostitute because of her white hair and her gray eyes. They're like, oh, you could play into the fantasy that you're a Descended woman. The men love that. We get good money for that kind of stuff. And Diem kindly declines the offer, but is tempted when she learns how much money she could be bringing in. As she's leaving the brothel, there's a blood-curdling scream that fills the air, and Diem rushes off to help because she assumes maybe somebody's injured and she's got all her healer stuff with him. Or she's got all her healer stuff with her. Comes across a Descended who is trying to kill his half-breed son, and the mortal mother is frantically trying to stop him. Diem intervenes, and she realizes that the mortal woman, is the same woman that helped her in the very beginning of the book when she was trying to outrun those guards and the drunk guys. And so she's like, oh my gosh, this woman's fate is now in my hand. Like the day that I was running from a scuffle that could potentially have harmed me, this woman helped me and saved my life, and now her life is in my hands. Diem does her best to save the child, but the mother does end up getting killed by the Descended, and unfortunately, the Descendant's magic ends up hitting the little boy and ends up killing the little boy too. So this is the moment where Diem really starts to, she's been mad the entire book, but all of her questions, all her anger, all her hesitations towards these different power dynamics that she's seeing in her day-to-day life, this is kind of what sets her over the edge. And she's like, that's it, I'm done, I'm fed up. Chapter 16. A man tries to console Diem. She's laying there in the street sobbing over this little boy that she couldn't save. A mortal man comes by and he tries to comfort her. And she's filled with rage, saying that, the boy was mortal and that they should take care of each other. The laws in place for these types of situations are not correct. The man tells her, hold your tongue, woman. No sense getting yourself killed over a stranger. Why not? I shot back. This boy was one of ours too. Shouldn't we protect him? Shouldn't we fight back and make them pay? These were dangerous words, deadly words. This man could have made a pretty penny turning me in for treason. In a city of poverty, I might as well have signed my own death warrant. But with a child's corpse still warm in my arms, I couldn't bring myself to care. Self-preservation had given way to smoldering infinite wrath, breaking the dam that held back all my words. They give the deceased mother and her child a proper burial, and Diem goes off to find Henry. She tells him, I'm ready to fight the Descended. Whatever it takes. I took a long trembling breath. I want to join the Guardians. Henry, of course, is like just elated by this. He's like, yeah, I have my, like, we're gonna be like the cutest power couple, just kicking Descended butt. So Diem is sent out on basically a bit of a initiative type mission to see if she's up to snuff, if she got what it takes. She's sent by the Guardians into Lumnos City. Henry tells her that she has a unique advantage to get key intel because as a healer, she's actually welcomed into the homes of the Descended, and that's like no other person in the Guardian has that same level of access. And so Diem is like very valuable for that. Diem's patient is the daughter of Everflame Bennett, the House of Bennett, one of the 20 houses that control the realm. So big man on the block. He in particular is an arms dealer. And so the Guardians are trying to get information on its shipments so that they can intercept one and put some of the weapons in mortal hands. Diem hasn't fully come to terms with her decision to break her vow as a healer as she should. That's a very serious thing. She should take that. She should be very serious about breaking those vows, you know? She's already finding this mission a bit suspicious. And she says, how did you know his daughter would be sick anyway? And how did you know he would send for a healer? He scratched the back of his neck. We have eyes on all the key Descended. We look for these things, you know, just in case. You watch out for their children falling ill? Clearly, Henry is lying. Diem is welcomed into the Bennett household by the Bennett's son, who is a really snarky little dude, but he doesn't have good parents. It seems to me like this is another thing about this book that I didn't quite understand was that all of these Descended parents seem like they have such a disconnect from their children. Like they're so unfeeling and they don't give a rip about their kids. Maybe as the series goes on, that gets explained a little bit better, but I don't know, I got kind of tired of reading that like all these Descended kids and had like horrible parents. I don't know. It just made him seem like a little bit bland. Everflame is in the household having a meeting with people, but the little boy is the one that ends up taking Diem back to see his little sister who's sick. And she checks out her new patient here. She's got a bunch of these like really painful welts on her arms. And Diem quickly figures out that she's been exposed to a flower or plant called Death Shade, and it's very easily treated with a cream. Sounds very similar to poison ivy. And Diem is like, well, how did you get a hold of Death Shade? Like, how did that happen? And she said that she was given Death Shade by a strange woman. And Diem asks if she recognized the woman, like if she'd seen her around or anything, and the little girl can't remember. So Diem treats the little girl on her way out of the house. She sneaks into Everflame's office, manages to get some of like the shipping order information from the guy's desk, and she's almost caught, barely gets out of the house without someone finding out or being questioned for her somewhat suspicious behavior. Chapter 18, Diem makes it out of the house and she is pissed and she goes after Henry, who's like waiting off nearby. And she's like, I'm gonna kill you for this near-death experience that I just went through. But then she reveals like, here's the information that I got. And Henry is like absolutely shocked that she was even able to get into Everflame's office. She gives him the information that she obtained and he's like over the moon, doesn't care that she just threatened his life. He clearly had underestimated her and didn't expect her to obtain any useful info. He tells Diem that he's shocked because like most of the time these initiative type missions are done more so to see if you put in the effort to get the information. He expected her to come out empty-handed and she largely over-delivered. It says, he lunged forward and wrapped me up in his arms, lifted me into the air as his lips crushed against mine and stole away my words. I'm so proud of you, he said breathlessly. He shook his head and gazed at me, his smile nearly blinding. His eyes glowed with admiration, his expression one of wonder and reverent kind of pride. Diem's taken off guard. She's taken off guard by this reaction, but oddly, she's like feeding off it too. Like she really likes the fact that she's getting this like love, adoration, and respect from Henry. So it turns out that Diem has actually snagged some of the best intel that they've ever been able to get. This girl is not trained to be a spy or to sneak around. I have a hard time believing that she's the only one that can figure out how to get intel somehow. I just think like, again, we have a character that's just like, it's just so, she's just so strong-headed and so bullheaded that she can just get everything, and she's so determined. She's more determined. She's the most determined. I don't know. I'm like, okay, sure. Everybody wants her, everybody's drawn to her, and she can get the best intelligence. Henry accidentally lets it slip that this information that she got will shatter any doubts that the Guardian would have felt toward her. And DM's a little bit confused that he said this. Turns out because everyone's suspicious of her because her father is a commander of the army, a high-ranking official. And so people clearly, like, he's against the rebels because he fought against them before. DM wanting to join the Guardian, they're a little suspicious of her, for good reason, I think. He says, we have many members in the army, but they're all soldiers and tradesmen, not high-ranking officers. Not people loyal to the Descended. I pulled back and frowned. My father isn't loyal to the Descended, but then Henry's like, well, no, he basically is. Like, he's led battalions for decades. He's fought against the rebels before. It's not that I wasn't aware. I heard the accusations before. I'd even made them myself the other night. But to realize that joining the Guardians might set my father as my own enemy, it's not always so black and white, I argued, a heaviness knotting in my stomach. My father fought back in his own way. Sometimes you have to do things you hate in order to stop worse things from happening. So she's trying to convince herself just as much as Henry, but Henry seems to remain silent out of a bit of a sense of pity for her. Like, he's like, oh, sweetheart, you just don't see what's blatantly in front of you. But honestly, like, she doesn't. So Henry takes her to this, not a speakeasy, what's it called? They go to, like, the safe house, the meeting house for the Guardians. And so he asks to be let in. And the guy who's guarding it tells him, no, because you've got someone new with you and she isn't officially a Guardian. And so they kind of get into a bit of a scuffle. And so finally, Henry is let into the building, but DM has to stay outside and wait with this strange guy, which I was like, I mean, okay, maybe not the smartest thing for you to do. Leave your girlfriend alone with a guy that is kind of being aggressive towards her. But finally, a few men come out of the building. Henry shows him the intel that DM got. The men have like a little huddle sesh and basically like, you know what, you can join. You're cool. You're chill. You got this. Like, come join our club. You're good, girl. DM is not officially welcomed into the Guardians. Chapter 19. DM's now a part of the club. It turns out there's actually a bunch of other women inside this meeting house. And so she's a little excited to see that. She's like, okay, so this isn't just like a male-only dominated situation. Interestingly enough, she catches eyes with a girl that she's had as a trainee at the Healer Center. DM is hit with guilt because her work for the Guardians it's a little bit of a gray area with her healer's background, and so that's a little tense and awkward. DM thinks to herself, any hope I might have had at hiding my decision to betray my vows was officially unavoidably gone. So we learn that there's this guy called the Father, which sounds very cult-like. His name is Vance. He's the head honcho here. He gets up and starts in front of everybody and starts giving off a bunch of announcements and a list of accomplishments and whatnot and what people are doing and blah, blah, blah. Vance tells everyone about the intelligence that DM brought in, and she's like slightly mortified by the attention and the spotlight that's put on her there. And then as they're sitting there, Breck, you know, the guy that gave her that knife, he comes up and he's super shocked to see DM. And he praises her for her efforts, and his words kind of ease the guilt that she was just battling with. The next mission that is coming up is then brought to the table. The mother of the Ouroboros cell sent word. She's planning a significant mission to take place soon, and she'd like our help. We need a guardian who can obtain access to the royal palace of Lumnos and find a way to move around the ground floor unseen. We'll provide... And Henry interrupts. Hey, that's you, Henry whispered as he prodded me with an elbow. You could take that one. Henry assures her that she could totally handle that level of a mission. So Henry just volunteers her for this mission and he's like, you could totally handle this. And I'm like, no, she can't, because she doesn't have any training in how to be a spy. She's a healer. I don't know. This stuff got a little silly for me. My issue with this is that he volunteers her, directly putting her into harm's way with no chance of backup being provided to her. Like, she's straight up told that by Vance. He's like, we can't offer you any level of backup whatsoever. You're just going to have to go into the palace and do this. They set her up for failure because I just don't know how you could sit there and say this is like a mission when you send one person into a heavily guarded palace to get intel with no backup, no plan, no nothing. I don't know. This was a plot point that I strongly disagreed with. Felt like it was kind of silly. Anyway, so she accepts the mission. Chapter 20, this is the framework for how just like fed up I got with Diem as a character. Mara is giving Diem the lowdown of how to tend to the king. Because remember, the descended king is dying. So her mother's primary job as the palace healer was to tend to the king. So they're going to the palace to tend to the king, and Mara's giving her the lowdown of how that goes. Diem at this point is really frustrated. She's mad. Her like vitriol and anger towards Descended is full blast right now. Mara tells her that Prince Luther has a strict decorum that he expects around the king, and Diem like rolls her eyes and she scoffs at this, and she's like, of course he is, laying the foundation now for his future reign of terror. She shot me a look. Keep comments like that to yourself, dearie. Your jokes won't find a welcome audience around this lot. Then Diem asks her why these Descended need mortal healers, because your mother said the Descended healers in Fortos already did everything they could for the king. Whatever illness has taken him, it doesn't respond to their magic. So the king is basically just fading away at this point. Nobody can do anything for him. Their job is to make him comfortable and let him fade away with as much grace and dignity as possible. As they're heading to the palace, Diem makes it pretty clear her hatred for the Descended. Mara takes issue with this. She halted and turned to me. Diem, is treating the king going to be a problem for you? You know, we leave our opinions of our patients at the door. I couldn't deny that I was struggling with it. It was one thing to overlook a sordid occupation of personal vices, but having watched the boy and his mother slaughtered in cold blood, knowing it was a result of the king's policies, ... She's going into this job with a bad attitude and a bad taste in her mouth. You can see where this is probably going to escalate. Mara reminds her that she's always been the healer that they could send into the worst situations possible, because Diem has always been good at keeping her cool. She reminds her, please remember your empathy, your professionalism. I know that you can do this. So Mara has like way more faith in her than she should. Anywho, they get into the palace. Luther is the one that pats them down and makes sure that they don't bring anything with them. He is aware that her knife is on her, but he allows her to keep it. And he's like feeling her down, like patting her down and everything. And it turns like odd, like a little too like sexually charged. Diem is like turned on by him touching her, and he seems equally flustered. And she says, too bad I didn't wear a dress, I murmured. His hand slid higher and my breath hitched. Our eyes caught for a split second. He said nothing, but I swore I felt his finger tighten around my inner thigh. You guys don't know each other. And they're probably going to end up being fated mates, because that's what I said. It's like, sometimes I'm like, it's lazy writing, because it doesn't require the author to really build the relationship, because it's like, well, they're fated. So like everything about each other just turns them on. So like the tension and that's all there. And I'm like, it's just, I feel like it's kind of weird that he's physically attractive, but she knows nothing about him. The things that she does know about him, she doesn't like. He lets her keep that knife on her he doesn't mention that, but she's aware, like he knows, and he's letting me keep this for whatever reason. Diem's idea going into this mission is that she'll just place her bag somewhere else she'll forget it. Oops, I forgot my bag somewhere else. So she puts her healer's bag into like a secluded room or something, and somehow nobody notices this. Luther ends up taking them to the king's chambers, and while they're treating the king, she's like, this is where I'm going to sneak away to get this intel for the Guardians. And so she's supposed to find this like hidden door that leads down to a passageway that leads to, there's like a canal underneath the palace with a ship or a boat of some sort that they use to travel. And she's supposed to search the boat for a place where a stowaway might be able to hide unseen. That's her mission. And she's been given this map to go off of. At first I thought she was given this vague map for her to fill in the blanks and say like, this is the map, this is the inner map of the palace. I think that actually would have been a more interesting mission, is for her to get intel and just to learn the layout of the palace. That way she could report back, and then the Guardians could have a more concentrated effort of like a group of people to infiltrate the palace and not one person. This was a choice again, and I don't think it was a very good one, because I was like, how is she supposed to be successful in this? Anyway, Mara and her are treating the king, and she's like, now I'm going to run off to go start my mission. So she literally just springs up and she's like, oh, oops, I forgot my bag somewhere else. And Luther's like, hang on, don't go anywhere. And she's like, I'll be right back, I promise. And she takes off running to go get her bag. And Luther can't immediately go after her because he's not allowed to leave a mortal alone with the king. Guards take off after Diem, but like nobody can catch her and nobody can find her. And she like manages to go get her bag, and then she gets her bag, and then she realizes like, oh crap, I can't actually like succeed in this mission. How are you going? Like, the mission was failed before it even started because it was stupid to start off with. Like, how is she supposed to sneak away from doing her actual job? And she didn't even sneak away. She like blatantly just ran off. She fails miserably at this mission. She gets a little beat up by guards. The guards end up catching her, and they like hold a knife to her throat, and she gets cut on her throat, and she gets like shoved up against a wall, and she gets roughhoused a little bit. And Luther, obviously, he catches up with them and stops it. Diem doesn't de-escalate the situation at all. She just makes everything worse. The guards are like gonna kill her, and Mara is begging for them to have mercy on her and making up a bunch of excuses for her. Luther orders her to be released. He really hates when anyone rough handles Diem. And I feel like it's possessive and it's unearned at this point, because the only thing she's proven to be is an absolute pain that doesn't listen to anybody at all, and she lacks tact and professionalism. Luther injures the guard that injured Diem because he doesn't like it when anybody hurts Diem, because he's possessive of her. And he says, the people in this palace must learn one way or another that there are consequences for disobeying me. We find out in the next few chapters that Luther is the royal guard commander. Like, he's in charge of the royal guard. These are his men directly underneath him. And he supposedly had this job for a while. So my question is, why are these guards so blatantly disobeying the prince in the first place? Because it's not like he's recently become a prince. He's been a prince his whole freaking life. And these guards are under his chain of command, and they don't listen to him. They disobey his orders right in front of him. They like grope Diem right in front of him. And like, I don't know. I just didn't buy this either. This whole chapter like just revealed a lot of things about the story that I was like, nah, this needed to be reworked differently, because this wouldn't happen. These guards would not disobey their direct orders while their commander is right there. So the mission failed, everything failed. And now Mara is extremely upset with her. Chapter 21, Mara is rightfully pissed with Diem for this whole thing that went down at the palace. Diem tries to apologize and tells her that she'll do better next time. And Mara's like, there is not a next time, girl. Like, you officially blew it. And Diem's like, well, you don't understand. Like, I have to keep this job because I have to do this in order for Teller to be able to still go to the descended school. Mara's like, where was this concern for Teller when you fought back against the guards? Or when you took off running from the king's chambers? Or when you mouthed off to the prince? That boy could have been kicked out of his school for any of those things. So Diem feels guilty, but I don't think she grasps how actually stupid she is. Mara continues, you really put everything at risk today, Diem. Our work at the center, your brother's schooling, your entire family's safety, my safety. Twice now I've had a palace guard's knife pulled on me because of you. And for what? Tell me, what was so important it was worth risking that? I appreciate that Mara's calling her out for this, but I just think like, there still wasn't a need for Diem to be like this. If this girl was 13 years old, I'd be like, sure, because she's 13. This girl's a grown adult. She shouldn't be having this many issues. And I don't know, I guess some people will be like, well, it's the flame route. She's not on the flame route, so she's like going crazy. And I'm like, just do better. Diem goes to the meeting house, gives her mission debrief, and, you know, the mission was a complete failure, but she made it out alive, so I guess that's the silver lining. One of the men's, like, suspicious, like, well, how'd you get it? You got out unharmed, and she's fired back that she was injured, but, oh, lo and behold, all of the injuries that she succumbed to in the palace, they're all healed. But again, we're not gonna be real with ourselves about what that means. So Diem can tell that she's, like, let these guys down, and so she feels really bad about that, and she's like, I need to get their attention and their adoration and their respect back. So she says, I could try again. I know a secret entrance into the palace. All three men sat straighter. What entrance? Vance asked. A hole in the wall of the palace gardens. The second I said it, regret sank in my chest like a stone. So yeah, she tells them that secret. Feels guilty about it. Then says, it hit me that Lana, the trainee healer who had accompanied Mara and me that day, had seen the secret entrance, and she was a guardian too. If these men didn't know about it already, she had chosen not to tell them. Whatever vow she may have broken for them, she'd kept that one, and I hadn't. She insists, I'll go back to the palace tonight and, break in. And Vance tells her, like, you're not ready for this level of mission because like you failed so badly today because you're such an amateur. But I'm like, excuse me, sir, the entire mission was an amateur failure from the start. How is she supposed to be successful with absolutely no backup whatsoever? And the fact that she was there to do a job for the king, that was her primary goal. Her job wasn't to sneak in. She was blatantly brought in for a job. How is she supposed to sneak away from her job? But don't worry, Henry tells her that he's still so proud of her and assures her like she's not breaking her healer's vows because she is helping people. He pulls her in for a kiss and then just casually asks her to marry him. And he's like, be my wife, let's fight this war side by side. Diem views marriage to Henry as a way of caging herself and subjecting herself to a man's authority, and just the idea doesn't sit well with her. She tells him that it's just a really big step. She needs time to think about it. And he's like, but it's a good step. You could move in with me and my father, and after the Guardians won the war, you could stop working and stay home so we could start a family. You would be such an incredible mother. And this is the wrong thing to say to her because she's not at a point where that's like something that she wants to do. Henry is convinced they're meant to be, and the Guardians will definitely win the war. And Diem is like, I don't think that any of this is going to pan out the way that we expect it to. Chapter 22, over the next few weeks, Mara has forbidden Diem from serving as the palace healer because she screwed up so bad. So in the meantime, Diem is paralyzed with fear that Mara will come back with word that the Guardians broke into the palace. Diem is still allowed to serve the Descended, but only in Lumnos City. She's not allowed to go to the palace. The Guardians have declined Diem's help for any further missions at this point, asking her to observe and listen to what's going on. She's barely seen Henry at this point because he's been on a top secret mission. She hasn't given him a response to his marriage proposal yet. When she's walking through Lumnos City after attending a patient, she runs into Lily, and they start chit-chatting. Lily ends up telling her Luther was just super impressed by Diem. And, that's not an easy thing. Luther doesn't just give out compliments very often. Lily tells her that he's a good man. Diem at first thinks that Lily is trying to tell her that Teller is a good man. And she says, oh, I didn't mean Teller. I mean, yes, he's a good man. A great man. One of the best I know. She laughed nervously, running her hands repeatedly through her hair as her cheeks blushed a soft pink. He's so kind and really smart, and he doesn't ever, never mind. I meant my brother, Luther. Prince Luther, he's a good man. And Diem's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then Lily continues to kind of, hype him up. And she's like, I know that he was rude to you at first, but really, like, he was just worried about me because I was injured. And she's like, he just has he takes a really big interest in everyone's safety, particularly mine. And that's when she reveals Luther is the High General of the Royal Guard. That's what it was. So he's in charge of keeping everyone in the palace safe. So if anyone gets hurt, he takes it as a personal affront, even if it's not his fault. Lily invites her to the palace to, like, hang out and have dinner, which I was like, that's really not a thing that mortals probably do, so I don't know how that would go over. Diem kind of declines that offer, but then she invites Lily to come to her house to hang out with her and Teller, because I guess, but I'm like, how is that going to work? How is a princess going to be allowed to come to a mortal's residence? I don't know. That chapter was silly to me too. Chapter 33, Diem at dinner brings up the fact that she ran into Lily. She starts teasing Teller about Lily in front of her father. Her father thinks that he's got a girlfriend at this point, and he's like congratulating him and cheering him on. Then it comes out that the girl in question is Lily, the princess, the Descended princess. And her dad immediately is like, well, that's okay. No. Like, that's not possible. So she's like, Diem's sitting there knowing that her father is going to give pushback on this. And she teases her brother anyway. And then Teller turns around and goes, well, did you give Henry his answer to your marriage proposal? And then her dad's like, what? I didn't know about this. I don't know. This whole chapter, it was just like silly. It was silly to me. I'm moving on because I didn't really care for it. At the very end of the chapter, they are interrupted because, of course, like, why finish a conversation and have a conclusion? Let's just constantly get interrupted by the next thing, the next plot point. And so they're sitting there and they hear this like just crazy explosion, and they run outside, and it looks like they look over toward Lumnos City, and you can tell like an explosive has been set off. And Diem's first thought is like, the Guardians have broken through the wall of the palace and are in there. And so she just grabs all her healer supplies and goes running. Chapter 24, DM is running towards Lumno City. She actually ends up running past Henry and a group of dudes. She didn't even realize it's him at first because she's like, I have to get to where this explosion is. Henry sees her and he reaches out and grabs her and pulls her to a stop, like asking what she's doing, where she's going. She tells him like, I'm gonna go, I'm sure there's people hurt, I gotta go help. And he just tells her like, hun, go home. I'm basically the person that set off the bombs. She isn't catching on, and he further insists that she needs to just go home and mind her business. She starts to get angry at him for telling her to go home, since it's her duty to heal people. And then he's like basically pleading with her. He says, we've had this plan for weeks. We can't risk your presence tipping them off. Please don't make me do this. So then she finally realizes like, oh, this was the Guardian's work. This Henry was involved. She thankfully makes a smart choice by understanding like, if I just pretend like I'm calm and I accept this and I go home, then they won't suspect me. So she chooses to lie. And she's like, oh, okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You're right. I'm going to go home. And so they turn around to leave, and instead of just keeping up the facade for long enough until she can sneak away by herself to go back, she just like gets them to trust her, and then she turns around and she's like, psych, and she takes off running to go where they specifically told her not to go. You had a moment where you were being smart, and then you ruined it by being dumb again. So now like everybody in the Guardians is going to be suspicious of her for that act. Chapter 25, the Guardians didn't blow up the palace, they blew up the royal armory. She runs into Luther and she tells him, I am here to help people. Please let me in to help. And he's of course like a little bit mad at her and doesn't really trust her. She has no healer supplies with her because as she was running away from the Guardians, they grabbed her and they grabbed the bag. And so she just dropped the bag and kept running. So like the only thing that she can really do at this point is hold people's hands while they die. She gets to the royal armory and sees Luther, tries to get his attention. He's like, sees her too, but he's trying to ignore her. And she literally just goes, Luther, you arrogant prick.
Dwight, you ignorant slut.
Come over here and talk to me. And of course, like everybody's shocked. I don't like this whole like, I can speak to him out of turn because I'm just such a little spitfire and it's cute. She pleads with him to let her help because she knows how badly she messed up stuff and she wants to make things right. Luther, of course, crumbles to her request and lets her in to go help heal the people who are injured. Luther takes her to a group of severely injured people. Some of them are dying, some are already dead, some are burned severely because there's, it was an explosion and stuff's on fire.
The building is on fire.
She's like mortified by this. She feels bad, deeply disturbed and guilt-ridden because she feels like she's partially responsible for some of it. She overhears Luther speaking with some of his guards about that there's still people trapped in the armory. So what happens next? Because she's so selfless and so concerned for others, she volunteers as tribute to go into the burning building and to get people out. Well, how is she going to do that? She's mortal. How is she going to have the strength? We just completely gloss over that. I think it's because like Luther at this point, he knows that she's not mortal. And so he's like, nah, she can handle it. At first he's like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, well,
No. Well,
sure. Yeah, let's do it. So he sends DM into this burning building. I guess the only reason why the other descended people don't go in there is because they're using their magic to hold the building up from collapsing. DM's the only one available to go into the building because of course. Chapter 26, her fight voice is back and it tells her to keep going. She's like passing out and having issues because she's breathing in all this smoke inside this building, but the voice is keeping her alive. So she ends up finding somebody that's trapped under a large beam. Somehow she's able to pull this beam off this person, which is like, an insane show of strength. But again, she's mortal. She ends up hauling out like 2 or 3 people from this fire. Of course, like as soon as the 2 other people get dragged to safety, the building falls on top of her. Chapter 27, everything hurts, but no worries. Strong arms cradle her arms and legs, and she's pulled into the tight wall of a man. Luther has her, and he takes her to his room. She is stripped of her clothes because they got ruined, and she's redressed, and she spends the night in Luther's room. No one's gonna raise their eyebrow at any of that. But chapter 28, DM wakes up. She is in Luther's bed, and he's sitting next to her, and he's like asleep in a chair, and he's kind of like holding her hand, or he was holding her hand.
I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
I guess I'm supposed to find this really cute, whatever. Luther wakes up, he catches her up to speed on everything that happened. Congratulations to DM, she managed to save some people. It turns out, it was in fact the Guardians that were responsible for the explosions, but we all knew that already. They kind of sit there and bond a little bit, and they like flirt with each other back and forth, but I don't know. This book, I just felt like it was kind of lackluster. He kind of confronts her on her thinking that she's mortal. He's like, you still really believe that? And she's like, believe what? That you're not. And his voice trailed off with an awful sadness, something that seemed too close to pity on his face. Luther believes she's descended, and she still does not believe that about herself. Luther asked Diem to take a look at the king before she leaves. Diem declines because she doesn't have her supplies with her, and he's like, well, at least go see the king and see if Mara needs to be called. When she goes into the king's chamber, that Gryvern that she saw earlier in the book, apparently the Gryvern like serves the king. They're like kind of bonded that way. So I think the Gryvern's name is Soray. Soray like comes in through the window, and of course they're just drawn together. Diem like reaches out to touch the Gryvern, and Luther like immediately intervenes, and he tells her like, don't touch her, like she could kill you, and the only way she can be called off is by the king, and he's unconscious, so let's not risk our lives that way, shall we? Diem was going to protest about him intervening, but you know, she's all flustered by the heat of Luther's skin against hers. Diem pulls herself together, checks on the king, determines he's fading away, like this is probably the end of his life, like he's got maybe hours left. We find out that Luther, and so the king is actually not his father, it's his uncle, and they were once very close. However, due to some differences in how the king ran a kingdom, Luther wasn't as tight with him as of late. He's a good man, remember? Diem asks if the crown passes to him, and he tells her that it's impossible to know because nobody knows. Most assume that it will go to him, but no guarantees. She asks if he does become king, if he will rule like this previous king, and Luther asks her if she thinks that the king was a bad one, and she says, he did bad things, I said finally. Passed bad laws, such as, I shifted my weight, laws that hurt children. The progeny laws, he guessed. I nodded. You think those laws should be abolished? I think no child should have to die because of who or what their parents are, even if that's the cost required to keep our realm powerful. If the death of innocence is a cost we're willing to pay, then we don't deserve the power. Conversation ends up changing, and Diem says to him, she finally gets the guts to ask, like, what happened with my mother? How do you play into this? Where is your role in all of this? He doesn't really give her much of an answer. It's a very cryptic interaction. He doesn't realize that Diem doesn't know the secret or why her mother disappeared. So again, like, this to me indicates that her mom is still alive and was on some type of secret mission or whatever, because the way that Luther is surprised that she doesn't know this information herself, I guess. Diem demands for Luther to tell her what actually happened, and of course we can't finish the conversation, and they're just interrupted again because Luther has to go handle another situation, and he leaves her alone with the dying king. Chapter 29, she's alone with the king, and something really kind of strange happens. The king ends up like waking up, and he tells her, give him our gift, daughter of the forgotten. When the end has come and the blood has spilled, give our gift to our faithful heir and tell him, this is my command. The king wakes up, it's like this violent thing, and he says these weird cryptic things that she doesn't know how to take. Nothing really makes any sense to her. He falls back asleep, but Diem's been like thrown back. She's like against the floor. The guards hear the kerfluffle that's going on in there, and they come bursting in. And everybody's already suspicious of Diem anyway because she's proven to be a reckless buffoon. So they burst into the room, and she's like, oh crap, this probably looks bad. They think that she's like killed the king or something like that. Luther goes up to the king and examines the king, and he realizes he's still alive and he's not been harmed. He tells her that she can leave. So she shoves past him and she races out of the palace, and she's all upset because she's like, well, I thought we were becoming friends there for a second. And it's just very adolescent. I just picture this girl stomping around everywhere she goes because she's just constantly this angry little mess. She leaves the palace and she's on the outskirts of it. And of course, Luther catches up to her, and he like stops her and grabs a hold of her wrist. And with her other hand, she holds the dagger to his throat because she's like, well, I'm just gonna slit your throat here because nobody will ever find you, or at least it'll take a while for them to find you. And I'm like, why are we doing the knife to the throat stuff? Happens so many times in this book. I was like, stop. And yeah, so she's like threatening to kill him. He tells her he isn't there to apologize because, you know, of course he suspected her because he can tell a threat when he sees one. His eyes are longingly gazing at her and like perusing her body, which just again feels kind of unearned. She's like, if you think I'm such a threat, I said, the huskiness in my voice revealing more than I'd intended. Perhaps I should take you out now while I have the chance. Kill you before you kill me. Do it, he said, no trace of hesitation. So yeah, he urges her to kill him because he can't think of a more beautiful way to be killed. Wow, this is so dramatic. They do not end up killing each other. Instead, they start passionately making out. Luther rolling his hips between her legs, and you know, Diem's just, she's never been kissed like this before. This is like
Started something new. Oh, yeah.
she realizes that Luther was never cold, that no, he's an inferno, just like her. Tell me you don't feel it. Sapphire sparks ignited in his gaze as the energy surrounding us fluttered in a matching rhythm. Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't feel my magic. Oh, she can definitely feel something, because you're grinding it between her legs right now.
Oh, I could feel it.
She can feel his magic, and her inner voice purrs at the sensation. Ugh. He smirked. You're no more mortal than I am. What? So yeah, clearly he's known that she's immortal, and she still denies it, telling him he's wrong. He hasn't pushed back, though. She tells him that she has to get back to her family, and he tells her that he won't enforce her mother's bargain and that Teller can still finish his schooling. He does ask her, though, like, would you still want to be the palace healer? Take back the role from Mara, not because, you know, your mother did it, because I want you to do it. Then she interrupts him and tells him that no, she's not going to take the job because she's decided that she no longer wants to be a healer. She's going to go do her own thing.
I gotta go my own way.
Chapter 30. First she goes to the healer center. She tells Mara she's stepping back as a healer. Mara thinks it's a good idea for her right now because she's like, I don't think you're in a good headspace to do this job anyway. Do it because you want to do it, not because a bunch of people told you that was what you had to do with your life. Mara takes it really well. She runs into Henry. Henry does not take these things well. He's mad at her again for the night before from running. And mind you, she's wearing a royal guard uniform because that's Luther's clothing. Henry's mad that she spent the night at the palace. That looks really bad for her. He's like telling her, like, you need to lay low because the Guardians are going to come after you because you really screwed this up. I don't really know if I can protect you much at this point. Diem is trying to tell him, like, she feels really conflicted about her role with the Guardians because she's just not so sure. Nothing's really black or white. One side isn't right over the other. There's mistakes being thrown back and forth. She feels very conflicted on this. Henry still believes that the Guardians are fully validated in the actions that they're taking against the Descended. He tells her that he loves her, and he says, your mother kept you away from the Descended, and your father's history means your family has never been targeted. You have been protected from them your whole life, but the rest of us haven't. Then he also like randomly drops on her that apparently Teller going to this Descended school is not good because once he graduates, he'll be sent to go study in Sophos, and the mortals that go to Sophos never return because they eventually become the research. But my retort to that was like, is that real or is that just propaganda from the Guardians? And then Henry reveals again to Diem that her father has been recalled to the army, saying he's a Descended puppet because he serves the king, the Descended king. Diem's in shock about this news about Teller's potential situation, and then also her father being recalled back to the military. There's a lot of stuff to just drop in the last like couple chapters of this book. She goes home, she confronts her dad about like, well, you didn't tell us that you were recalled back to the military, and they get in a really big fight about that. There isn't potential for war being declared. War has officially been declared, so he is officially been called back into service. And he's like, but you know, it's no big deal because you're a healer. Teller's almost done with school, so you know, you guys will be good. And then Diem's like, I'm not a healer anymore, I quit. And he's like, why would you do something like that? And he's like, you're gonna go back to Mara and you're gonna have her reinstate you because you have to have a job while I'm gone. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. I refuse because I'm tired of doing things for other people. I need to do something for myself once and figure things out on my own. And then he's like, okay, well, if you're not going to go back and get your healer job, then you have to marry Henry. You have to have someone to provide for you. And then she's like, no, I'm not doing that either because I don't want to marry Henry. The situation just careens out of control. You know, they start yelling at each other, and Diem's like, you're not my real dad. You can't tell me what to do. And then she makes an accusation about her father being aware of where her mom is and not caring about the fact that her mom disappeared. And her dad gets really mad about that. And he tells her to leave the house. And so he kicks her out of the house. Chapter 32, Diem runs off into the woods. Teller ends up following after her. You'll never guess what happens in the woods. The voice that's in her head telling her to fight all the time. Now it's just like a constant presence, and it never shuts up, and it's overwhelming, and she's completely overtaken by it. It says, I lifted my hands to the gods as a great beam of light shot from my palms into the heaven. "Take me," I whispered to the voice. "I surrender." She surrenders, and then she's wearing the crown. She's the new Queen of Lumnos. In the epilogue, we do for sure find out that Arlie Bellator, her mother, is alive. She's in a different realm for some reason. She's close to being able to go home. We don't quite know what she's doing in this realm. She's just there for some particular reason. She hears, like she can hear the cataclysm of the crown passing on to someone else, and she realizes the king has now finally died. This is the sign. This is what she's been waiting for. It says, after 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days of waiting, of being apart from her family, of retracing the steps that haunted her, the king of Lumnos was finally dead, which could only mean one thing. In 30 days, Arlie Bellator was going home. And then in the bonus chapter is from Luther's POV, and he's all flustered about the fact that he made out with DM, and he's just like, "I've never felt anything like this before." He goes to see the king. The king tells him, as he's basically dying, "The girl, she brings death, war, an end for everything." He placed his hand on the scabbard. "You must use the sword." Luther now knows that DM is the new Queen of Lumnos, and so he gotta go find her, and he's like, "Find her, I will." That's where the book ends. So I know I kind of blazed through that last section there, but honestly, I was kind of annoyed by this book, and I feel like I talked about it for way too long already. All right, so just some final thoughts on this book. Things that I liked, we do have a pretty clear plot. DM's mom goes missing in the very beginning, and that is a key theme throughout the entirety of the book. It's brought up enough that it doesn't feel like the main character forgot about it. Her mom was always on her mind, and she was always trying to figure out a way to find out information about her mom. So I did appreciate that. I think the political struggle between the Guardians and the Descended, I thought that was decent. No situation was black or white. It's so hard with these romantasy books because, again, a lot of them just seem, like I said, very mediocre, which is disappointing because I love a good romance and I love fantasy. And so I thought like the creation of the romantasy genre would mean that I would basically get the best of both worlds. And I have been like pretty disappointed with the romantasy books I have picked up. They are just, the romance ain't romancing. The female characters almost all feel the same to me. They're all these people that everyone's drawn to, and they're so wonderful and magical and awesome and cool and stabby and nasty and like, and you know, all the men are always like well over 6 feet tall, and they're like growling and possessive. If anybody has a recommendation for like a legitimately good romantasy, throw them at me, please, because I'm dying to read something. I know for me, one of the, let's see, where is it at? In my experience with reading an actually well-written romantasy, I know I've mentioned this book before, but Rain and Ruin, this book here was actually pretty darn good. I feel like this was a good template for sure on like a well-written, informed romantasy. I enjoyed this one. This one is very heavy on political intrigue, which I don't love that stuff, but I thought it was well written, and like the dialogue was well written. I believed these people were royals because the dialogue was written so well, and then the romance that ends up coming forth in the story was again well written. I think it was well formed. I think I'm gonna wrap it up there, guys. I think my mic is like seconds from dying. So thank you guys so much for joining me again for another review. I greatly appreciate your support. If you would love to leave me some likes, I would be great. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Would really appreciate that. Lets YouTube know that you like my stuff and it pushes it out to more people. I was told that growing on YouTube is a snail's pace, and I'm believing that because I see that for myself. If you like what I'm doing, let me know. I'm not sure what I'm reviewing next quite yet. I've been trying to read more books, so I have more stuff to review. So we'll figure out something here shortly. But in the meantime, thank you all so much. Bonnie says thank you. She can't wait to go outside because it's warm so she can run around. Huh, Bon? Now you're going to be quiet? Now you're going to be shy? All right, guys. Thank you so much. I will see y'all in the next one. Toodles!